Here are 10 things Americans tend to mess up when they're learning German. Well, sorry for bashing Americans here. This is just a clickbait for my video title. I'm really talking to everybody whose first language is English or who is really, really good at speaking English, because English and German are closely related languages. And when you speak English well, then you might have a couple of tendencies to bring into the German language that are not really helpful and that make your process of learning German or speaking German well really difficult. So if you find this video helpful, please share it with your German learning friends, subscribe to my channel, activate the bell also. But now let's dive right in. Let's start with pronunciation. Pronunciation is usually super underrated in traditional language schools. I don't really know why. I put a lot of focus on pronunciation in my German course, but the pronunciation is really, really important if you want to be understood well and if you want to sound well, if you want to get your German to a high level, then you should really focus on your pronunciation a lot. And number one that is really, really difficult for English speakers is the R sound in German. So there is a couple of advantages with the R in German because you can choose which one you want to do. You can do a Spanish R, like with the tip of your tongue, or you can do the French R, like in your throat, or you can even do a third one, which is an R that is pronounced at the same position as the letter K. So, so the three R sounds are totally perfect in German. It's a regional question. Some people say it with the tip of the tongue, some people say it in the throat, some people say it in this middle position. Me personally, for example, I come from the south of Germany. I should say the Spanish R with the tip of the tongue, but I don't. I pronounce it at the K position, so I say in German, and nobody thinks I'm weird because of that. Well, maybe some people think I'm weird, but not because of my R. But that works perfectly well. Unfortunately, the only R sound that doesn't work in German is the English R sound. So you will have to learn one of these three R sounds. Make sure you pick one that comes a bit natural to you, that's a bit easy for you. But if you have to learn one, it will take some time and it's worth the time. So please invest it. There is a video on this channel about the letter R where I teach you how to pronounce it, and I hope this is helpful for you. Number two is the CH sound, the ich or ach sound. So we have actually two CH sounds. They're closely related, but not the same. And they don't exist in the English language, but in contrast to the R sound, they're really simple. There is not much to practice here, but for some reason, many people don't put in the time and effort needed to do it. It's just a couple of days, couple of weeks, maybe at most. John F. Kennedy, when he came to Berlin in 1963, and he said this famous phrase, Ich bin ein Berliner, he practiced the CH sound in the car that would drive him to the venue. And he didn't have access to my pronunciation videos. He just asked the driver or the translator, I don't know. And he managed it like in a decent way. So if he can do it, you can do it. It's really just a question of knowing what to do. It's not very complicated. Number three is the L sound. So in English, you might not be aware of it, but you have two different versions of the L. We might call them a bright L and a dark L. So you say play, but you also say call. And you can hear that the l at call is a bit, darker, sounds a bit like the O is still continuing actually. And this sound does not exist in German. So in German, we only have the play L. But I hear many Americans or English speakers in general say, for example, alle or something like that. So that doesn't work. How do you practice it? Make sure that the body of the tongue is higher up than when you say call in English. Number four, in German, the vowels are stable. What does that mean? So when you have a word like in English, for example, teacher, the E sound is not completely the same at the beginning or at the end. So I'm not a professional English teacher, so English teacher, here you have it. But it sounds like something like teacher. Yeah, the E is a bit, it changes its quality while I'm pronouncing it. In German, this never happens. So in German, if you have a long vowel, it has exactly the same sound quality from the beginning to the end. And that's something that Americans or English speakers in general tend to get wrong many times. So you say something like Leben, but in German we say Leben. It's exactly the same E sound from the beginning to the end, and when the B comes, we cut it off like with a knife. So make sure that your vowels are just completely stable. It's not even that important that the quality of the vowel is exactly the same as it is in German, but it has to be stable. It cannot move from from one quality to another. Yeah, so it's Leben, Liebe, Hose. Okay, that's enough for pronunciation. Let's move to vocabulary. Number 5, the mistake I often see is translating word by word. I'll give you 2 examples for this. One is the word so and also. These words have 2 different meanings in German, and especially what is a bit weird is that the meaning for so and so does not overlap completely. So for example, in English I can say something like, I was sick, so I couldn't work. But in German, you cannot say, ich war krank, so ich konnte nicht arbeiten. That would be wrong. You have to say also. So that's the problem, that sometimes when we translate from one language to the other, we think that the meaning of the word is exactly the same as in the original language, and especially in languages like English and German, where the words are completely similar. They sound the same, they're written the same many times, but the meaning is not exactly the same, or it does not overlap. This applies even to many simple things. For example, a table. Well, what's a table in German? Tisch, right? What's a desk in German? Also Tisch. It's Schreibtisch. So you see, in German, the concept of what Tisch is a bit broader than the concept of what a table is in English. So again, you cannot translate word by word. And I'll give you a last example. That's the modal verbs. So verbs like should, must, can, and so on. In German, if you say ich muss nicht, it doesn't mean I must not. It means I don't have to. I can if I want to, but it's not an obligation. So try to, when you learn new words, try to memorize the meaning in German, try to learn the context of the words. By the way, that's also why I use a story to teach vocabulary in my German course and not just isolated vocabulary lists, so that you learn them in context, because that's really important, to use the words in the context that is natural in the German language. Number 6, inserting English words. So when you don't know a word, it's very easy to get this temptation of just saying the word in English, because people in Germany often understand English very well. So you might be practicing German with someone, and you know that this person speaks English very well. So you can just say, brauchst du den Key? And because you forgot that this is Schlüssel in German, right? You should get rid of that bad habit, because it will inhibit your progress for vocabulary learning. Much of what we do when we're fluent in another language is that we move around words that we don't have in our repertoire. So for example, I guess for you, I sound like I speak English quite fluently, but I only have the fraction of vocabulary of a native speaker. A native speaker might have some, I don't know, 20,000, 25,000 words. I will have 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, maybe. I don't even think I have that many. Yeah. So much of my English learning was a training in saying things that are too difficult for me, avoiding constructions, avoiding expressions that I just don't have in my vocabulary in English. And I'm trained to automatically say something that's a little bit easier. And you have to do the same when you speak German. So you have to practice saying things that are too difficult. And of course, well, what do you do if you don't know what a key is in German? Well, you can ask for it. You can say, brauchst du diesen, das da, dieses Ding da, was heißt das? Was ist das auf Deutsch? Ah, Schlüssel. And odds are you're going to remember this word much more easily, because now you've learned it in a specific context where somebody needed that key, maybe, and it's much easier to recall than if you learn it on Duolingo. Number 7 is closely related to inserting English words, and it's of course worse than inserting, it's shifting to English. Now, you get that this is of course not helpful to learn German. Obviously, if you want to learn German, you have to speak German, you can't speak English all the time, but it's easier said than done, because as I said before, in Germany many people speak English quite well. So many people come and say, oh cool, you're from the United States, you're from Australia, I can practice my English with you. And then you can say, yes, we can, but I also want to practice my German. So make sure that also your interests are taken care of. So for example, if you have this new colleague at work, if you are already living in a German-speaking country and say your work language is English, but there's this German colleague and she tells you she would like to practice her English in the lunch break with you, you can say, yeah, perfect. I'm happy about that. But let's do that Mondays and Wednesdays, and Tuesdays and Thursdays we're going to speak German, please. And insist that you really get the opportunity to speak German, even if it's hard at the beginning, even if maybe at the beginning you can only do it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and really talk about simple things that are just too easy. So make sure when people want to shift to English that you put up some healthy boundaries here. Of course, this doesn't apply in a shop or in a restaurant, especially when you're a beginner. You know, the waiter might be stressed and wants to get the order as quickly as possible, and then you're trying to explain what a cappuccino with a lot of milk foam is in German, and that's maybe too complicated and you get misunderstood. That's not the situation to insist on speaking German. But when you find the opportunity to practice with neighbors, colleagues, tandem partners, whoever, make sure that you really get the opportunity to use your German as much as you can, and make sure then also of thinking of number 6, not inserting English words. So for the last 3 things, let me talk about grammar. Number 8 is too much focus on cases. I see so many students and even teachers being obsessed about dative, accusative, genitive, and I understand, because it's a weird concept that you don't have in other languages, and there's a lot of these different endings and you have to practice them, you can get them wrong. But let me tell you something that might get me rotten tomatoes thrown at me by some German teachers. Cases are really not that important, and the reason is that it's hard or almost impossible to create a misunderstanding by using a wrong case. Like, for example, if we go back to the key here and you say mit, now you need dative, right? With the key or by the key. Mit dem Schlüssel is correct, right? What if you say mit den Schlüssel? Mit der Schlüssel. That would be correct if the key was feminine gender, which it's not, it's der Schlüssel. But all of these 3, I will definitely understand what you want to say. I might not even hear that you've made a mistake. So when you're speaking German, cases are completely overrated, and I happily invite you here to just not think about them at all when you're trying to learn to speak German. When your German gets to a higher level, then you want to get that right. Yeah, when you're at the B1, B2 level, then you want to put more focus on cases. At the A1, A2 level, please take any information about cases more as an illustration to show you how the language works, but it's not a concept that you need to apply when you're speaking German. Number 9, however, is too little focus on verbs. So I always tell students, if you want to focus about something on grammar, and by the way, pronunciation is more important than grammar, I believe, but I've said that before. If you want to focus on something in grammar, focus on the verbs. Verb endings in German are not so super simple either, unfortunately, but they're much easier than, for example, in Spanish or in French. So it's not that difficult, and it saves you a lot of energy if these endings just come naturally to you. And this is actually something where you can produce misunderstanding. Like, if you say something like ich schreibst, I'm like, what? Who is writing? You want to write? Or I should write something? Or did you write something and use the wrong past tense for? I don't understand what you want to say, okay? But if you use the wrong case, as I said before, then I will always understand what you want to say. So at the beginner levels, please focus on the verbs. Don't focus so much on the cases. And number 10, finally, is asking the question why. I see too many students who approach grammar as a rule book that is as strict as in physics or in chemistry. It's not. Grammar is a description, and language is something that is organic. It has evolved over time. It's still evolving. It's actually just a collection of habits and routines. Sometimes they are bad, sometimes they are messy, sometimes they're contradictory. And with grammar rules, we try to see patterns, we try to see tendencies, but these are never 100%, and it will cost you a lot, or it will give you a lot of pain if you have this idea, if you hold on to this idea that all the grammar rules have to be logical. Sometimes it's just easier to accept that it's not logical. That's just the way we say it. It doesn't make any sense, but that's just the way it is.